Senator Gallacher, then I'll go to Senator Riem. Senator Gallacher.
Now, Secretary,
I'm just looking at the budget papers expanding Australia's diplomatic footprint, where I think we've allocated, or you've allocated, $98.3 million over 4 years to boost the Department of Foreign Affairs trade and overseas network by opening new diplomatic posts in Buku, Papua New Guinea, Doha, Makassar, Phuket, Ulaanbaatar, and increased resources for Houston. So my question, Mr Secretary, is when that is spent, so you've got a budget appropriation, when that has been spent, who signs off on the actual expenditure in each of those locations? Is that yourself, the Minister, or is that a delegated authority?
Well, Senator, the Chief Financial Officer may want to add to this. The budget obviously gives us the headline authority to expend on those new policy proposals. The detailed expenditure is something which would be examined and approved within the department. So
by whom? That's my question. At what level is that approval delegated, or is it the Minister, is it yourself?
I'll ask the Chief Financial Officer to take you through the delegation.
I don't want to be taken through anything. I want to know who actually signs off on the expenditure.
Let me ask him to respond to that.
You don't?
No, I don't personally, because I delegate a lot of my authority down the line.
So you're delegating your authority and the Minister's authority on expenditure to what level?
Well, that's what we're about to answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Senator, the department operates a range of...
Could you just introduce yourself, if you will?
Sorry, Senator. Paul Wood, Chief Financial Officer, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. The department operates a decentralised delegations structure. So depending on an officer's level, they will have a certain delegation amount, and these may go down to lower level APS staff. The majority of the delegations reside at the senior executive level, so an SCS Band 1 or an SCS Band 2. In relation to the expenditure under this proposal, there are two components. The $98.3 million that you referred to is split into an operating component and a capital component. The capital component is $36.6 million.
I can see that from the budget papers. I don't need to be read again.
Correct, Senator. That's the building construction component. The operating component covers salaries, security, as well as rent. Those are the main components. The delegation authority for the capital side would generally be the Executive Director of the Overseas Property Office, or there may be other elements where I may sign off, or other officers within the corporate or the property area.
So you may sign off?
I have a delegation authority
yep. So I understand perfectly what you're saying. So if I was to go to a couple of items, say a 10-year lease, who would sign off on that? A refurbishment or a fit-out of a property, who would sign off on that? Is that delegated to an SES Band 1?
It is, Senator. I may refer to Mr Nixon. There are some rules around long-term leases where we need to seek the Finance Minister's approval. So if it goes over a certain period, we need to seek high-level approval, but in general, there will be an internal approval for leases.
So what about monetary value? Who approves monetary value? Are you saying it's delegated to an SES Band 1, irrespective of how many hundreds, thousands or millions of dollars it is?
No, the delegations have a dollar limit.
Okay, well, I'll cut right to the chase.
Yep.
There is a property in Doha, in the Tornado building, which has been leased for 10 years, which we believe has a 5% increase per annum. How much is the value of that lease?
I might need Mr Nixon's assistance.
Kevin Nixon, Executive Director of the Overseas Property Office. Senator, I thought I had the details of the lease with me here. I'm just looking for them within the documents that I have. Senator, I think the first point is I don't believe the lease has actually been signed as yet. As you may be aware, we're actually waiting on the approval of the Parliamentary Public Works Committee before we commit to that.
Well, I think that's a very pertinent point, but I mean the whole process of estimates is to scrutinise the expenditure of taxpayers' money. Now, if one committee of the Parliament is not able to scrutinise leases, the appropriate place to ask about leases is at estimates. So,
sure, Senator, I think you're,
give us the figure.
Absolutely appropriate question to ask.
So Senator, the Tornado building has an area to be leased of 895 square metres. There is a total lease cost or a total lease cost of, as I understand it, $80.70 per square metre per month, with an annual escalation rate of 1.5% per annum.
So $80 a square metre per month times 900. So you got to get a calculator.
Do you have an annual figure, Kevin?
I don't actually have that converted, Peter. I'm sorry.
Okay, so if I would do that, so it's 1,000 times 80 times 12. Is that roughly what I'm talking about? Or are you going to do the calculation for me? What I'm after asking is, how much is the lease per annum? Can somebody do that calculation for us? And we'll move on to the next issue, which is, you've mentioned there's 895 square metres, and we are advised, well, you can advise the committee, how much is that costing to fit out?
Senator, I think we provided some advice that was updated yesterday to the committee, indicating that the estimated fit-out cost was in the order of about $7 million Australian, approximately.
Well, I mean, we need to be very clear on the public record. What was the medium works proposed to the Public Works Committee for the fit-out?
Senator, yesterday the advice was a figure of $7,036,000.
And the earlier advice a week ago?
There was earlier advice, I believe, through a letter that was sent to the committee referring this as a medium works on the 5th of January. And the figure at that point was slightly higher. And I'll provide that figure in just a moment.
We are on the public record. It was $1 million higher. I mean, we're led to believe the initial proposal was approaching $10,000 per square metre, $9,994 a square metre, which is, in my experience on the Public Works Committee, double the most expensive fit-out ever approved by that committee. So I'm trying to get to the bottom of how much you're paying for the lease, how much you're paying for the fit-out, and at what level in the department, who takes these sorts of decisions of expenditure of taxpayers' money? And Secretary Varghese, you're saying you delegate it. I want to know who you delegate it to. I want to see that person who signed off to say approaching 10,000 a square metre was a good deal. Because I'd like to hear some justification of that expenditure of taxpayers' money.
Well, Senator, I provide advice in respect of the costs of the fit-out for Doha and for other locations.
I accept that the Office of Overseas Property follows instruction of the department. It's you source a building and you give them back value, the value of what you need to do, and someone has to say, do you sign off it, Mr Wood? Have you signed off on this proposal that's
quite
currently
often,
before
but as Mr Nixon said, we haven't signed the lease. If I could just note, Senator, we do go through a costing process to actually get this money recognised and appropriated through the budget. So we would have had these type of discussions, conversations with the Department of Finance to arrive at the funding for this post.
So the Department of Finance has approved this project?
the Department of Finance approve a budget envelope for the construction of this project, and within the 98.3 million is a component of around 20 million for Doha, and of that around 7 is for the capital.
Okay, so I would like the Secretary to take on notice that I would like the expenditure in Doha and the responsible officer, at what level was that delegated to? So if you're not going to oversight and approve this expenditure, who did and at what level they were? Because on a rudimentary calculation, it's the most expensive fit-out that has ever been put before the Public Works Committee of the Australian Parliament. Secondly, I really think that it'd be, well, it's you know, to put figures of $80 a square metre per month, you know, I just want to know the annual fit-out, and I'm sure someone can give us that before we finish this session. But if I then go to the number of people working in the building, how many people are going to be working in this building? Who's got that information?
Well,
I know the answer
Senator,
to the question,
the other night we provided a response to that question when we briefed the Public Works Committee, and I think the response was 3 DFAT A-based officer, 1 Austrade officer, and a total of, I believe, 11 locally engaged staff.
Okay, and when we do the sums on that, you would then divide them by the square metre of the leasable component, and you would end up with a standard that's probably 4 times what the normal public service standard is. They'd have about 63 square metres each. All that, $10,000 a square metre to fit out, and all that, a rent that we haven't even been made aware of yet. So why are we renting so much space for so few people at such a great cost?
Senator, again, we did raise this the other evening when we briefed the Public Works Committee.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you, with the indulgence of the Chair. This is a different committee.
Certainly.
I'm trying to go to the budget papers, examine expenditure, and I understand it might be frustrating for you, Mr Nixon, but I am going through another committee process. So
Certainly.
Everything I ask is new to this committee.
Certainly, Senator. So, Senator, there was an instruction that we were to open a new post in Doha. We undertook a market assessment. We identified a range of options available for consideration. So in the first instance, my understanding is there was something in the order of 11 buildings that were deemed to be available. We then went through a process of undertaking some options analysis of those, shortlisted to a smaller number of buildings, then subjected those buildings to a number of technical due diligence exercises, primarily focused on the location and operational capability of the buildings, the security installations and enhancements that were available, fire systems that were of importance to us, the structural integrity of the building, and then the mechanical and building services. And from that exercise, there were 3 buildings that were shortlisted. So those 3 buildings were the Tornado Tower, the Burj Doha, and another building referred to as the Gate. So after further analysis, the building that was selected, referred to as the Tornado building, was viewed as being superior to the 2 alternatives. And it was for that reason that that building was recommended.
I have no issue with what the Office of Overseas Property has done. It's followed its instructions. It's come out with its best assessment of the property. My question is, back to the department, when the costs of that become known, when the built-in redundancy of floor space is known, who signed off on, almost, as you say, Mr Wood, $20 million worth of expenditure in Doha, when we have, facilities in Dubai, we have facilities in Abu Dhabi. Where does this come from? How do you...
Well, Senator, the decision to open a post in Doha was a government decision, and sitting behind that was a judgment that we needed to extend our diplomatic footprint in that part of the world, so on top of what we already have. given the economic and also some of the broader political issues that are now bigger in our relationship with the Middle East and with the Emirates. So why we're doing Doha on top of the others reflects those judgments. If we can't answer the question about who will sign off on the delegation when it is finally approved, I'll take that on notice. We'll give you an annualised figure for the rent. Can I just make one other comment? I don't think you can necessarily, for the opening of a new post, just take the square meterage and divide it by the number of employees and compare it to the average square meterage of a public service department in Canberra, because...
No, we never did that. We compared it with the Commonwealth offices in Sydney, and it's double those.
Well, but they would be requirements at a post which, you know, may justify, and certainly I would expect it would justify, ending up with a different ratio, whether that's in relation to meeting rooms, whether it's in relation to public spaces, whether it's in relation to the broader representational function of a post.
So if we go back to the budget statement, this will increase Australia's diplomatic presence and will promote Australia's foreign policy, aid and trade interests. So is this decision of Doha underpinned by a foreign policy criteria or imperative?
Well,
is it underpinned by an aid imperative?
Well, it's underpinned by a national interest imperative, which has a foreign policy element to it, a very strong trade and investment element to it, and a slightly less strong aid element to it.
So we rule out aid, less strong, okay, but...
Well, I wouldn't rule it out, but I'm trying to give you a sense...
Are we providing aid to the richest per capita country in the world?
No, we're not providing aid to the UAE. We don't have bilateral aid programs in the region except... To Qatar, we don't have bilateral aid programs in the region except to the Palestinian territories.
Right. And our trade interests, the most significant item of trade at the moment is motor vehicles, which will cease in 2017. So we'll be back to live animals and box meat.
Well, I think the whole purpose of trade policy is to keep expanding the scope of our trade opportunities. And
right. Well, I accept that that's not for me to make that decision. That's for the government to make the decision. But what I am pressing home is that we have a fit out for 14 people, which comes out at probably 63 a square metre, which is vastly in excess. We don't need the whole floor. So we've leased the whole floor for 10 years plus an increase when we clearly can't fill it on the current staffing or even the prospective staffing. And the fit out itself is coming in at 10,000 or thereabouts, just shy of 10,000 a square metre. And my scrutiny here is who in your department actually signs off on these things, and where do they actually present a plausible case to justify such expenditure? Because I'm sure that you're not going to do that in Mongolia or New Guinea or even in Houston, Texas. So it is a standout in terms of expenditure. And we can have a political difference about the importance of Qatar in terms of trade. We do $1 billion worth of trade. It's going down. It's going to go down in 2017 when motor cars fall out of it. But where do you delegate $20 million worth of expenditure? Doesn't anybody come back and say to you, by the way, this is looking a bit high. I mean, are you okay with it?
Well, the role of the Overseas Property Office is to get the best deal in the circumstances. Now, you know, we're dealing with a high-cost environment, so your numbers are going to look larger than your numbers in, say, Phuket, where we're opening an office as well. So you can only look at these numbers in the context of where the mission is, what it's doing, and what its staffing profile is. Now, you know, you've made the point that you think the overall floor space seems excessive. I think the Overseas Property Office would be able to explain why that amount of space is appropriate and required. Well, we may end up with a different judgment as to whether...
Perhaps we can get that evidence. Why is that floor space appropriate and required?
Certainly, Senator, because when we look at the alternative buildings, the floor plates there ranged in size from, at the gate, about 700 square metres. The other alternative at the other extreme, the Burj Doha, the floor plate is about 1,090 square metres. The practice in the Middle East and dealing with landlords there is very much they lease buildings on a whole floor basis. So they provide very unattractive alternatives if you're seeking to take less than a whole floor, and in some instances they simply don't make the space available if you are seeking to take an area less than, as I said, a whole floor plate. When we look at the preferred option, the Tornado Tower, the unit rate per square metre applied is lower than the unit rate per square metre for rent for each of the alternatives, and the annual rate of increase of 1.5% is less than the 5% that was sought for each of the alternatives.
Okay. Now, just to go back to the lease is in Australian dollars that you've quoted?
The lease will be, I believe, in Qatari Rial.
Okay.
So we have adopted a conversion rate utilising the what's referred to as the BER.
So the figure we'll get will be in Australian dollars?
No. The fee we get will be in...
I'm sorry, the committee. The information you provide to the committee.
Sorry, to the committee, yes.
Yeah, that will be in Australian dollars.
Correct.
So the other committee that I'm a part of that looks at this looks for in the public interest, value for money, any revenue. So any revenue derived from this this new embassy that's... Is there any prospective revenue, Secretary, that would come from this investment of taxpayers' money?
Senator, we're not subleasing any of the space, so we will generate no income from that tenancy.
So we've got a little bit more, well, we've got a lot more than what we need because of the way they lease in the Middle East. You have to take the whole floor. We've got 14 people in 900.
Well, Senator, I think, we're seeking to make the best use of the space that's available. In an ideal world, yes, we would probably have sought to lease less space. So therefore, the area that is what we refer to as perhaps in excess of what would be the normal requirement is being utilised as an opportunity for the Post to conduct some of their public diplomacy activities at the mission itself, and also to use it as an opportunity for trade or promotion type activities as well.
Okay, so I'll just finish with two last questions.
Hold on 1 second if we can on the same topic.
Yeah, just
Senator Forsyth.
on the to introduce the concept of opportunity cost, how significant is Qatar and the region there in terms of our national security activities, counter-terrorism, etc., our trade opportunities? If this is the best available, how does it stack up in terms of the priority we should be placing on securing a place for our diplomatic efforts?
Well, I think it's fair to say, Senator Forsyth, that not only is the trade and investment agenda with Qatar an evolving one, but the political and strategic engagement that we have is also at a much higher level now than it would have been, say, 5 or 10 years ago, and I don't see that diminishing. In fact, if anything, I can see it increasing, and these were some of the considerations behind the government's decision to open in Doha.
Thanks, Senator Forsyth. Senator Gallacher.
So there's no income from the project. The next point is value for money. Is someone on that side of the table going to put to this committee that this is value for money? Taxpayers are getting value for money for an investment of $20 million.
Well, Senator, I think in respect of the estimate for the fit-out costs, what we have provided to the committee is the cost estimate at this point in time. So we will continue to pursue other opportunities for refinement and savings within that budget. Within the budget that has been provided, there are still substantial contingency amounts which are appropriate at this point in time until such stage as we are able to execute a works contract, get better definition around pricing, and potentially timing for the delivery of the works, and then as the project develops, we would hope to return some of that contingency as unexpended.
Okay, and finally, Secretary, I think from your website brief there have been 3 ministerial visits to Qatar since 2011. Would that be correct?
I'd have to take that on notice unless there's...
So it's not a post that we visit, or it's not a place that we visit on a regular basis?
I imagine that would change once we have a post there.
So we've had agriculture, trade, and I can't recollect the other ministerial visit, but they've been sparse and they've been few and far between up till now.
Well, I think
we're
we're looking to the future in relation to why we want to open in Doha, but I'm happy to take on notice whether the 3 is accurate and current.
In respect to the other posts that are mentioned under that 98.3 million, I'd appreciate on notice if you could give us, an assessment of what those costs are looking like.
Sure, we'll take that on notice.
And if you could really follow up who have you delegated the sign-off of these lease and fit-outs.
Thanks, Senator Gallagher.
Thank you.
Senator Rhiannon.